Good day, folks. The Pro Audio Journalist here. Mike Clink and Guns N' Roses, what a match made in heaven. Without a doubt, the best recorded capture of a Les Paul into a Marshall in history. Use Your Illusion 1 is my favourite record of all time, so this one is close to the heart for me. Although Mike has a somewhat simplistic approach to capturing these guitars, it should be mentioned that the mixing and mastering process also inevitably shaped these tones. Until further interviews come out with more information, all we can do is speculate as to what processing moves were done during recording and mixing. Just to clarify, Mike Clink produced the Guns N' Roses records, however they were mixed by other people. Appetite for Destruction was mixed by Michael Barbero and Steve Thompson. Use Your Illusion was mixed by the legendary Bill Price. Mike Clink has stated in interviews that he used a Shure SM57 on the grill of the guitar cab, somewhere just off the centre. However, there is an interview with Guitar One where I believe he gave away a secret. His exact words were, "I used 2 SM57s. I also read another interview where he said, I quote, "I used a couple of 57s. I've recently found an interview with Mike Clink's assistant, Micajah Ryan, who said that Mike used 2 SM57s on the cabs, one mic on the bottom left speaker and the other on the top right speaker. I wish I found this interview with Micajah Ryan years ago, because Mike's wording of using a couple of 57s really sent me down a rabbit hole of experimentation. My experiments concluded that Mike Clink was definitely using 2 57s close up on the cab, and this was long before it was revealed in interviews that this was right. Using a second 57 up on the grill on a different speaker thickens the sound and really enforces the low end. It's just a fuller sound. If you listen to the intro guitar of Back Off Bitch from Use Your Illusion and focus on the low end, it's pretty obvious that twin miking is going on here. The low end of the guitars is massive, just like the results I got with 2 mics. Before it was revealed that the second mic was used close up on the cab, I did have great results using a 57 for a distant mic as well, basically a room mic for the cabs, and I really loved the results. I also had amazing results running this room mic through a room reverb, which I will elaborate on the connection of this process shortly. However, a room mic wasn't used on these guitars for these songs. Mike used Neve preamps for the SM57s, which was a different sound to the API preamps he was using for bass and drums. And he also used a Pultec in the chain to further sculpt the sound. Although Micajah doesn't recall a Pultec being in the chain, Mike Clink has mentioned it in interviews. Last in the chain was a DBX 160 with minimal gain reduction. The DBX really does contribute to the sound. In tests that I've done with the hardware, just running through the unit adds some excitement and adds a smoothness to the mid-range and high end. Although I've not found a plugin that replicates this texture, I will say that the modern DBX 160 iterations do have this quality, just a touch less hairy. Mike has also mentioned that a Roland SRV 2000 reverb unit was used for subtle room reverb on the guitars. This tends to glue them into the mix and slightly soften the high end. Very tastefully done. As I previously alluded to, my experimentation with the 57 as a room mic actually did sound close to the recorded tones. This is because the SRV 2000 is mimicking a room. I highly suggest experimenting with 3 57s on a guitar cab, 2 close up on different speakers as Mike had done, and also a third mic as a room mic to mimic the SRV 2000's behaviour. I'm praying someone has the foresight to create a plug-in version of this unit, because I've gotten to know the unit and it's a classic in my opinion. It's safe to say that Mike didn't simply put a mic in front of a cab and call it a day. He has remarked in interviews that he was constantly running out to the live room to tweak the amp settings, thus I imagine he was tweaking the EQ and compressor settings too. We also know that LA3As were used on the guitars during the mixing process. This was confirmed by Steve Thompson, the mixer of Appetite for Destruction. I believe it's safe to say that the same compressor was used on the Use Your Illusion guitars. They really locked down the guitars and they stayed in their spot. I really believe both mixers knew how to find the LA3A sweet spot because the guitars are definitely not overcompressed. However, I believe it's been noted by Bill Price that the Use Your Illusion records were heavily compressed with the SSL bus compressor. We can only speculate on the EQ moves done in the recording and mixing process. However, there is definitely a mid-boost going on, especially in the Appetite for Destruction records. There's a unique saturation I associate with a decent EQ boost and an LA3A compressor. If I had to guess, I'd say that they boosted some lows, mids and highs by the end of the recording and mixing process. However, it's the mid boost that catches my ear as defining the sound. I did have some success boosting between 3 to 5 kilohertz. It was quite common in that era for guitars to have a boost around 4 kilohertz, so I'm assuming they were keeping with this trend. Where the boost came from and what unit is the million-dollar question. Did the boost come from the EQ section of the 1073 mic pre, or the elusive Pultec, or a Trident console EQ during tracking, or was it in mixing stage on either the Neve or SSL console depending on the record? Appetite for Destruction was mixed on a Neve console and the Use Your Illusion records were mixed on an SSL console. In regards to the final result we hear, I imagine the process is not as clean as we imagine. Could have been an EQ move at each of these production stages. Considering Mike has commented on a Pultec being in the chain, possibly moves were made on this unit, or maybe he was just running through the Pultec to round things out for that character. The Appetite for Destruction guitars definitely scream a Neve EQ 3.2 kHz boost. The Use Your Illusion guitars, while sounding more aggressive, actually have a more subtle mid-boost. If you really want to dive into how to get your guitars to sound more like these tones, my advice is use FabFilter Pro Q4 Match EQ feature. Find a segment of the song where the guitars are isolated and analyze and capture the frequency response and then match it onto your guitar tracks. Whilst good for education purposes, I would still hope you are crafting your own guitar sounds just to be original, and it's way more fun. Anyways, I hope this helps the recording cats out there, especially the Gunners fans. I'm the Pro Audio Journalist. I'll see you in the next one.